The thing about anesthesia is that it strips away every filter you've spent your life building. I learned this on a Tuesday morning in October, sitting in the recovery room at Pine Valley General Hospital, watching my wife Lindsay emerge from her gallbladder surgery like a drunk person confessing to a priest. "I've been sleeping with Danny for 8 months," she mumbled, her eyes still closed, the words slurring together but crystal clear enough to stop my heart mid-beat. My mother, Carol, was sitting across from me, knitting needles frozen in her weathered hands. Her face went sheet white, then red, then something approaching purple. The steady beep of Lindsay's heart monitor seemed to get louder, matching the sudden pounding in my chest. Danny. My brother Danny. I'm Jack Garrison, 42 years old, and until that moment I thought the worst thing about my day would be the 3 hours of waiting room coffee and my mother's running commentary about the hospital's fancy new chairs that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Lindsay shifted on the hospital bed, her blonde hair matted against the pillow, still talking to whatever dream she was having. "He's so much better than Jack, more successful, more... everything." Mom's knitting needles clattered to the floor. She started to stand up, probably to shake Lindsay awake and demand answers, but I held up my hand. Something cold and calculating was settling into my chest, replacing the initial shock. This was information. This was ammunition. And ammunition was only useful if the enemy didn't know you had it. "Let her sleep," I whispered to Mom, my voice steadier than I felt. For the next 20 minutes, Lindsay provided a detailed confession that would make a divorce lawyer weep with joy. 8 months of sneaking around, hotel rooms paid for with our joint credit card while I thought she was at work conferences. Danny picking her up from our house on days when I was out on job sites, fixing other people's broken things while my own life was falling apart without my knowledge. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm a handyman. I fix leaky pipes, broken windows, faulty wiring. I solve problems for a living. But I'd been living with the biggest problem of all and never saw it coming. When the nurse finally came to check on Lindsay, I stepped out into the hallway with Mom. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that cold hospital glow that makes everyone look like they're fading. "You gonna let that tramp and your brother get away with it?" Mom asked, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. Carol Garrison had raised 2 sons in this town, buried her husband 5 years ago, and never backed down from a fight in her life. I looked back through the window at Lindsay, still sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about her next rendezvous with Danny. My brother. The golden child who'd always gotten everything handed to him, who'd charmed his way through school while I worked construction jobs to pay for community college, who'd somehow convinced everyone in our family that his real estate career made him more successful than my honest work with my hands. "Not a chance," I said, and meant it. But I wasn't going to be rash about this. Rash was what Danny would do. Rash was what the old Jack might have done. Storm over to Danny's condo, throw some punches, make a scene that would end with me looking like the crazy, jealous husband. No. This required planning. This required the same methodical approach I used when I was rewiring a house or rebuilding an engine. You don't just start pulling wires or removing parts. You study the system. You understand how everything connects. Then you take it apart piece by piece until you can rebuild it the way it should be. Lindsay woke up an hour later, groggy and asking for her phone. I handed it to her, watching her face carefully for any sign that she remembered her anesthesia confessions. Nothing. She just smiled weakly and asked if the surgery went well. "Perfect," I told her. "Everything went exactly according to plan." The beautiful thing about being married to someone for 12 years is that you know all their passwords. Lindsay had always been terrible with technology, constantly asking me to fix her phone, update her apps, transfer photos to her laptop. She trusted me with her digital life completely, which made it remarkably easy to access her old phone backups while she recovered from surgery. I waited until she was napping, then went down to my workshop in the garage. It's my sanctuary. Workbenches lined with tools, spare parts organized in labeled bins, the smell of motor oil and sawdust. I'd built this space to be exactly what I needed, everything in its place and a place for everything. I fired up my laptop and connected her old iPhone, the one she'd replaced 6 months ago but never properly wiped. The backup files painted a picture that was somehow worse than what she'd confessed under anesthesia. Photos, dozens of them. Lindsay and Danny in hotel rooms I recognized from their credit card statements. Charges I'd assumed were legitimate business expenses. Text message threads going back 9 months, not 8. Messages that started professional, discussing a property investment opportunity that Danny was supposedly helping her with, then gradually became flirtatious, then explicit. The property investment was real, it turned out. Danny had convinced Lindsay to put $15,000 of our money into some commercial real estate deal. Our money. The money I'd earned fixing leaky roofs and installing kitchen cabinets. Money we'd been saving for the vacation to Ireland that Lindsay had been talking about for 3 years. But the messages revealed the truth. The investment was just Danny's way of creating a legitimate reason for them to spend time together. The real business they were conducting was in hotel rooms across 3 counties. I screenshotted everything, organized it into folders, backed it up in 3 different places. Then I sat back in my workshop chair and planned my next move. The smart play was to contact a lawyer, file for divorce, take Lindsay for everything I could get. The photos alone would guarantee that any judge would side with me. I'd get the house, probably alimony, definitely a big chunk of that real estate investment if it was worth anything. But that wasn't enough. That was just legal revenge, clean and antiseptic. It wouldn't touch Danny, who would probably just move on to the next woman, the next mark. It wouldn't address the deeper problem, that everyone in this town, including my own family, had always seen Danny as the successful one, the charmer, the winner. I wanted them both to understand what it felt like to lose everything, not just money or property, but reputation, respect, the comfortable life they'd built on lies and betrayal. I started with Chelsea Morrison, Lindsay's best friend and the biggest gossip in 3 counties. Chelsea worked in the same office as Lindsay, knew everyone's business, and had never met a secret she could keep for more than 24 hours. The next day, while Lindsay was still recovering at home, I called Chelsea and asked if she wanted to grab coffee, just a concerned husband looking for advice about how to help his wife through her recovery. We met at Murphy's Diner on Main Street, the kind of place where the coffee is always fresh, and the waitresses have been working there since before I was born. Chelsea arrived wearing enough makeup for a photo shoot and carrying a purse that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Jack, you look terrible," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You must be so worried about Lindsay." "I am," I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. "She's been acting strange since the surgery, saying things that don't make sense. The doctor said anesthesia can cause confusion, temporary memory issues." Chelsea leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. This was exactly the kind of drama she lived for. "What kind of things?" "Weird stuff about Danny. She keeps mentioning him, like they've been spending time together that I don't remember. I'm sure it's just the medication, but..." I let my voice trail off, looking appropriately confused and concerned. "Oh, Jack." Chelsea reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm sure it's nothing. Danny's been helping her with that investment thing, right? Maybe she's just confused about the timeline." "Investment thing?" The look of panic that crossed Chelsea's face was beautiful. She realized she'd just revealed something I wasn't supposed to know about. Well, I thought you knew. She mentioned Danny was helping her with some property deal. I assumed you were involved." I sat back, letting confusion and hurt play across my face. "Property deal? With what money?" Chelsea was squirming now, clearly wishing she'd never agreed to coffee. Jack, I really think you should talk to Lindsay about this. I don't want to get in the middle of anything. You're right, I said, standing up and dropping a $10 bill on the table. I should definitely talk to Lindsay and Danny, clear up any confusion. I left Chelsea sitting in the booth, probably already composing the text messages she'd send to her other friends about the weird conversation she'd just had with Jack Garrison. Perfect. The thing about small towns is that secrets are like water. They always find the cracks. By Thursday, 3 days after my coffee with Chelsea, I could feel the change in how people looked at me. The sympathetic glances from the cashier at the hardware store, the way Pete Kowalski, who owned the Splintered Board Tavern, lingered a little longer when he asked how Lindsay was feeling. Chelsea had been busy, but she didn't know the whole story yet. Nobody did. And I intended to control exactly how and when the truth came out. Lindsay was feeling well enough to complain about being bored, which I took as a good sign that she was ready for company. I called Mom and Danny, suggested we have a family dinner to celebrate Lindsay's successful recovery. That's so sweet of you, Jack, Lindsay said when I told her about the plan. She was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, laptop open, supposedly working from home but actually scrolling through social media. I feel like I haven't seen Danny in forever. Yeah, I said, watching her face carefully. It'll be good to catch up. I spent Friday preparing, not just the dinner, Mom's pot roast recipe, Lindsay's favorite, but the other elements of the evening. I set up the laptop in the dining room, ostensibly to show family photos after dinner. I'd created a slideshow of memories from the past year, carefully curated to tell a story. Danny arrived first, carrying flowers for Lindsay and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. He looked good, as always. Perfectly styled hair, expensive casual clothes, the kind of confident smile that had been charming people since we were kids. Jack, buddy, he said, pulling me into one of those back-slapping hugs that felt like a performance. How's our patient doing? Our patient. Like he had any legitimate reason to be concerned about my wife's health. She's doing great, I said, really great. The surgery went perfectly, no complications at all. Mom arrived with dessert and immediately started fussing over Lindsay, who was dressed up for the first time since the hospital. She'd put on makeup, done her hair, chosen a dress that was probably more effort than she'd made for me in months. Dinner conversation was surreal. Danny told stories about his latest real estate deals, making everything sound like a Hollywood movie where he was the star. Lindsay laughed at all his jokes, asked interested questions about his work, played the role of the supportive sister-in-law perfectly. Mom watched everything with sharp eyes, occasionally catching my glance across the table. She knew what was coming, even if she didn't know the details. After dessert, I suggested we look at some family photos. I've been organizing all our pictures from the past year, I said, opening the laptop. Thought it would be nice to remember all the good times we've had. The slideshow started innocently enough. Family barbecues, holiday celebrations, pictures of Lindsay and me at various events around town. Danny and Lindsay smiled and made appropriate comments, probably thinking this was just another example of Jack being sentimental and slightly boring. Then came photo number 12. I'd found it buried in Lindsay's phone backup, taken at a restaurant in the next town over. Lindsay and Danny sitting in a booth, his arm around her shoulders, both of them looking at each other with expressions that no brother-in-law and sister-in-law should ever share. The date stamp in the corner showed it was taken 7 months ago, right around the time their text messages had started getting flirtatious. The room went completely silent. Lindsay's face went through several colors, pale, then red, then pale again. Danny started to say something, stopped, then tried again. Jack, that's not... We were just what? Mom's voice cut through the air like a knife. Just carrying on behind my son's back? Mom, please, Danny started, but she was already standing up, her chair scraping against the floor. Don't you mom please me. Daniel Patrick Garrison, I raised you better than this. Lindsay found her voice. It's not what it looks like. We were discussing the investment opportunity, and Danny thought it would be better to meet somewhere private where we wouldn't be interrupted. Investment opportunity, I repeated, my voice flat. The one where you spent $15,000 of our money without telling me? The look that passed between Lindsay and Danny was everything I needed to see. Panic, guilt, and the dawning realization that their secret was out. You went through my phone, Lindsay said, her voice rising. You had no right to… I had no right? I stood up slowly, feeling calmer than I had in days. I had no right to wonder why my wife was spending our savings on real estate deals with my brother. I had no right to ask questions when she started working late 3 nights a week and coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. Danny tried to leave, actually pushed back from the table and headed for the door like he could just walk away from this conversation. I caught him by the shoulder, spun him around, and slammed him back against the dining room wall hard enough to rattle the picture frames. We're not done talking, I said, my face inches from his. For the first time in his life, Danny looked scared. The charm was gone, the confidence evaporated. He was just a guy who'd been caught cheating with his brother's wife and didn't have a clever way to talk his way out of it. Jack, I can explain… Explain what? Explain how you convinced my wife to betray our marriage? Explain how you used our money to finance your affair? Explain how you looked me in the eye at Christmas dinner and wished me a happy new year while you were planning to destroy my life? It wasn't like that, Lindsay said from behind me. It just happened. We didn't plan it. I turned to look at her, still keeping Danny pinned against the wall. 9 months of hotel rooms just happened? 9 months of lies just happened? $15,000 of investment just happened? Chelsea chose that moment to ring the doorbell. I'd texted her earlier, suggesting she stop by around 8:30 to check on Lindsay. Perfect timing. Mom answered the door, and Chelsea walked into a scene that was probably better than anything she'd ever seen on her favorite reality TV shows. Danny pressed against the wall, my hand on his chest. Lindsay in tears at the dining room table. The laptop still open, displaying the photo that had started it all. "Oh my God," Chelsea whispered, pulling out her phone. "Oh my God, Jack, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad." She was recording. Of course she was recording. This was the kind of content that would make her the center of attention for months. "Get that camera out of my house," Lindsay screamed, but it was too late. Chelsea had already captured enough footage to destroy whatever was left of Lindsay's reputation. Danny tried to push past me toward the door, but I wasn't done with him yet. "You so much as sneeze near my family again," I said, loud enough for Chelsea's phone to pick up, "and you'll need anesthesia for real." He ran. Actually ran out of the house, leaving Lindsay to face the aftermath alone. By the time Chelsea left, 20 minutes later, after getting a full account of the story for her social media followers, Lindsay was crying in the bathroom, and Mom was washing dishes with the kind of violent efficiency that meant she was planning someone's funeral. "What happens now?" Mom asked. I looked at the laptop screen, still showing that damning photo, and smiled for the first time in days. Now we let the whole town know what kind of people they really are. The video went viral by Sunday morning, not internet viral, but Pine Valley viral, which meant that everyone in town had seen Chelsea's shaky phone footage of Danny running out of my house while I threatened him against the dining room wall. I knew this because Pete Kowalski called me at 7 a.m. "Jack, you need to get down to the bar," he said. "People are asking questions, and I think you want to control this narrative before it gets out of hand." The splintered board doesn't usually open until noon on Sundays, but Pete had made an exception. When I arrived, there were already a dozen people sitting around, nursing coffee and discussing the previous night's drama with the intensity of political analysts. "There he is," called out Mike Torres, who worked at the paper mill. "Jack, what the hell happened at your place last night?" I'd prepared for this moment. Not just what to say, but how to say it. The right mix of hurt, anger, and dignity. The wronged husband who was handling his betrayal with more class than his cheating wife and brother deserved. "I found out my wife has been having an affair with my brother for 9 months," I said, sitting down at the bar. "They used our savings to finance it, lied to my face about it, and when I confronted them, Danny ran like a coward." The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once, asking questions, offering opinions, sharing their own theories about Lindsay and Danny that they'd apparently been keeping to themselves for months. "I always thought there was something off about how much time they were spending together," said Janet Murphy, who worked at the bank. "She was in there every week, making transfers to accounts I didn't recognize." "Danny's been bragging about some big real estate deal," added Tom Chen, who owned the auto repair shop next to Danny's office. "Said he had a private investor who was really committed to the project." Private investor. That was one way to describe a cheating wife spending her husband's money. My phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I showed the message to Pete, who read it and shook his head. "She's probably panicking about work," he said. "Chelsea's been posting about this all morning, tagged Lindsay's company in half the posts." That was better than I'd hoped. Lindsay worked for Consolidated Insurance, a regional company that prided itself on family values and community involvement. They wouldn't appreciate having one of their HR managers become the center of a small-town adultery scandal. I texted back, "You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with my brother." Then I turned off my phone and let the town's gossip network do the rest of the work. By Monday morning, the story had evolved and expanded in the way that small-town rumors always do. Lindsay wasn't just cheating with Danny, she was embezzling money from her company to pay for their affair. Danny wasn't just a cheating brother, he was running a real estate scam that targeted lonely housewives. I wasn't just a betrayed husband, I was a local hero for exposing the truth. None of the additional details were true, but I didn't correct them. Truth was less important than justice, and justice required that Lindsay and Danny understand what it felt like to have their reputations destroyed. Lindsay called in sick to work Monday and Tuesday. Danny's office received several calls from concerned citizens asking about the ethics of real estate agents who used client funds for personal expenses. Chelsea, riding high on her moment of fame, started a Facebook group called Pine Valley Truth Tellers that quickly attracted 300 members, all eager to share their own stories about Lindsay and Danny's suspicious behavior. Wednesday evening, they tried to fight back. I was at the splintered board, having dinner and enjoying the fact that everyone who came through the door wanted to buy me a drink and tell me how sorry they were about my situation. It felt good to be the center of positive attention for once, instead of just Danny Garrison's less successful older brother. They walked in together, Lindsay, Danny, and Chelsea, who had apparently been recruited to help them salvage their reputations. Lindsay had dressed carefully, trying to project the image of a respectable businesswoman who was being unfairly maligned. Danny wore his most expensive suit, probably hoping to remind people of his professional success. The bar went quiet when they entered. "Jack," Lindsay said, walking over to where I was sitting, "we need to talk in private." "I don't think we have anything to discuss in private," I said, not turning around. "You made this public when you decided to cheat on me with my brother. Now it's public." "You're destroying our lives over a mistake," Danny said, his voice carrying that old familiar tone of condescension. "We made an error in judgment, but this vendetta you're on is just making you look petty." I turned around slowly, looked at both of them, then started laughing. "A mistake? 9 months of hotel rooms and $15,000 of my money is a mistake? You know what a mistake is, Danny. A mistake is when you accidentally grab the wrong coffee cup. A mistake is when you forget to return someone's phone call. What you did was make a choice, every single day for 9 months, to betray your family. People are saying things about us that aren't true. Lindsay said, her voice rising. They're saying I stole money from work, that Danny is running scams. You know that's not true, Jack. You need to tell people the truth. The truth is that you're both liars and cheaters who destroyed a marriage for your own selfish pleasure, I said. Everything else is just details. Danny stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. This ends now, Jack. You've had your fun, but enough is enough. I stood up, aware that everyone in the bar was watching, probably recording on their phones. You're right, I said. It does end now. Then I slapped him. Not a punch. I'm not stupid enough to start a real fight in front of witnesses. Just a sharp, open-handed slap across the face that echoed through the silent bar like a gunshot. Danny staggered backward, more from shock than impact, and tripped over a chair. He went down hard, landing in a puddle of spilled beer and wing sauce, his expensive suit now decorated with the remnants of someone's dinner. The bar erupted in laughter and applause. Touch anything of mine again, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, and you won't walk out. Danny scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and rage, but Lindsay grabbed his arm before he could retaliate. We're leaving, she announced, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. Good idea, Pete called out from behind the bar. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize to Jack properly. They left, Danny's ruined suit leaving a trail of beer and sauce on the floor, Lindsay's careful composure completely shattered. Chelsea lingered for a moment, clearly torn between loyalty to her friend and the social capital she'd gained from exposing the affair, then hurried after them. The bar stayed busy until closing time, with people buying me drinks and telling me stories about their own experiences with cheating spouses and backstabbing relatives. I was the hero of my own story for the first time in years, and it felt better than I'd imagined. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. Thursday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Lindsay's boss, Margaret Hoffman, called her into the office for a discussion about recent events and their impact on the company's reputation. I knew this because Chelsea, despite her brief attempt at loyalty, had texted me the details. Apparently, Lindsay had called her in tears after the meeting, and Chelsea, unable to resist being the center of drama, had shared the story with everyone. Lindsay was suspended pending a full investigation into her conduct. Not fired, not yet, but suspended without pay, while the company reviewed whether her personal scandal had created a hostile work environment for other employees. The hostile work environment, as far as I could tell, consisted mainly of her co-workers spending their lunch breaks discussing the affair instead of working. But corporate America takes its image seriously, especially in small towns where reputation matters more than profit margins. Danny was facing his own professional problems. His boss at Pinnacle Realty had received several calls from clients asking whether their investments were safe, whether Danny could be trusted with their money, whether the company did background checks on their agents' personal conduct. Real estate, like insurance, is a business built on trust. When people start questioning your integrity, your career begins to crumble. I decided it was time to accelerate the process. Friday afternoon, I drove to the Riverside Plaza office complex where Lindsay worked. I'd been there dozens of times over the years. Company picnics, holiday parties, the occasional lunch date back when we still did things like lunch dates. I knew the building's layout, knew which elevator Lindsay used, knew that she usually left work around 5:30 and stopped at the coffee shop in the lobby before driving home. I also knew that Margaret Hoffman, her boss, usually worked late on Fridays, trying to clear her desk before the weekend. I arrived at 5:15 and positioned myself in the lobby, reading a newspaper and waiting. Lindsay emerged from the elevator at exactly 5:30, looking tired and defeated. She'd lost weight since the surgery, and not in a healthy way. The stress was eating her alive. She saw me immediately. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for you," I said, folding the newspaper. "I thought it was time we had that private conversation you wanted." "Here?" "Why not? It's neutral territory. Public enough that you can't accuse me of threatening you, private enough that we can speak freely. She looked around the lobby nervously, probably calculating whether any of her co-workers were still in the building, whether this conversation would become tomorrow's gossip. "Fine," she said, "but make it quick. I want you to resign from your job." She stared at me like I'd suggested she set herself on fire. "Are you insane? I'm not resigning. This is my career, Jack. I've worked here for 8 years. And in 8 years, you've built a reputation as a professional, trustworthy employee. Now that reputation is destroyed. Every day you stay here, you're reminding everyone of your affair. Every meeting you attend, every email you send, people are thinking about you and Danny instead of thinking about work. That's not my fault. That's because you turned our private business into a public spectacle." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You turned our private business into a public spectacle when you decided to cheat on me with my brother. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about who you really are." Margaret Hoffman chose that moment to walk through the lobby, heading for the parking garage. She saw us sitting together and hesitated, clearly debating whether to intervene. I stood up and walked over to her. "Mrs. Hoffman, I'm Jack Garrison, Lindsay's husband. I wanted to thank you for handling this situation so professionally." Margaret looked uncomfortable, but she was too polite to ignore me. "Mr. Garrison, I'm sorry you're going through this difficult time. I appreciate that. I know Lindsay's personal choices have put you in an awkward position. I just want you to know that I don't hold the company responsible for her actions." "That's very understanding of you." "Lindsay's a good employee when she's focused on work instead of her personal relationships. I hope you'll give her a chance to prove that she can separate her professional life from her personal mistakes." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I'd managed to remind Margaret of the scandal while appearing to be supportive, emphasized Lindsay's personal mistakes while seeming generous, and positioned myself as the reasonable, forgiving husband who was handling his wife's betrayal with dignity. Margaret nodded politely and continued toward the parking garage. Lindsay, who had heard every word, looked at me with something approaching hatred. "You bastard," she whispered. "You're trying to get me fired." "I'm trying to help you understand that actions have consequences," I said. "You can resign with dignity, or you can wait for them to fire you. But either way, your career here is over." I left her sitting in the lobby, probably trying to figure out how much more damage I could do to her professional life. The answer, as she would discover over the next few days, was quite a lot. The Pine Valley Fall Festival happens every year on the first Saturday in October. It's the kind of small-town event that brings everyone together: families, local businesses, politicians running for county office, teenagers looking for somewhere to hang out, old-timers who remember when the festival was just a harvest celebration for local farmers. This year, it was also going to be the stage for the final act of my revenge. The festival committee had asked me to be the grand marshal of the parade, an honor that usually went to retiring teachers or local business owners who'd made significant contributions to the community. But my situation had made me a folk hero of sorts. The hard-working husband who'd exposed his cheating wife and brother, the underdog who'd stood up for himself against people who thought they were better than him. I accepted the position graciously. Lindsay and Danny had been laying low since the incident at the splintered board, but I knew they'd be at the festival. It was too big an event to avoid, and they were probably hoping to rehabilitate their images by showing up and acting like normal members of the community. I spent the week before the festival preparing my final surprise. The parade float was provided by the festival committee, a simple platform decorated with fall flowers and a banner reading Pine Valley Community Hero. But I'd asked for permission to add my own decorations, explaining that I wanted to thank the community for their support during my difficult time. What I actually prepared was a multimedia presentation that would ensure Lindsay and Danny's humiliation was complete and permanent. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for the festival. I arrived early to inspect the float and make sure all my equipment was properly connected. The sound system, the laptop, the portable projector I'd borrowed from the community center, everything was in place. The parade started at 10 a.m., winding through downtown Pine Valley before ending at the festival grounds in Memorial Park. I rode on the float, waving to the crowd, accepting their cheers and applause, playing the role of the dignified victim who'd triumphed over adversity. Lindsay and Danny were in the crowd, standing near the bandstand where the parade would end. They dressed carefully, Lindsay in a conservative dress that projected respectability, Danny in casual clothes that were expensive but not flashy. They were trying to blend in, to be seen as normal community members rather than the subjects of scandal. When the parade reached Memorial Park, I asked for permission to address the crowd. The festival organizer handed me a microphone, probably expecting a brief thank you speech. Instead, I activated the projector. The first image that appeared on the portable screen was a photo of Lindsay and Danny from her phone backup, one of the more explicit pictures, their faces clearly visible, the hotel room unmistakable in the background. The crowd gasped. Several people started recording with their phones. Lindsay screamed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the park, "I want to thank you all for your support during the past few weeks. It's meant everything to me to know that this community values honesty, loyalty, and family." The second image was a screenshot of their text messages, enlarged so everyone could read Danny's promises to take care of Lindsay and her responses about how much better he was than her boring husband. "Some people think that marriage vows are just words," I continued. "Some people think that family loyalty is optional. Some people think they can lie and cheat and betray the people who trust them without consequences." Lindsay was trying to push through the crowd toward the float, but people were blocking her way, some deliberately, others just too shocked to move. Danny had disappeared entirely, probably running for his car. The third image was a bank statement showing the $15,000 transferred from our joint account to Danny's real estate investment fund, along with hotel receipts showing how that money had actually been spent. "But this community knows better," I said, looking directly at Lindsay, who had finally reached the front of the crowd. "This community understands that actions have consequences, that truth matters, that people who destroy families and betray trust deserve exactly what they get." The final image was a composite I'd created, Lindsay and Danny's faces photoshopped onto a movie poster for a film called Homewreckers of the Year, complete with fake reviews calling their performance shameless and a masterclass in betrayal. The crowd erupted. Some people were laughing, others were cheering, a few were taking pictures of Lindsay's horrified face. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her carefully constructed image completely destroyed. "And that," I said, raising my voice over the noise, "is the thing about anesthesia. It makes you say things you can't take back. But some of us remember everything." Danny chose that moment to reappear, pushing through the crowd toward the float. He was red-faced with rage, probably thinking he could somehow salvage the situation by confronting me publicly. "Jack, you son of a bastard!" he shouted, lunging toward the platform. I sidestepped easily. Danny, thrown off balance by his own momentum, stumbled forward and fell face first into the decorative trough of mud and fallen leaves that surrounded the bandstand. The crowd's laughter was deafening. Danny struggled to his feet, covered in mud and maple leaves, his dignity as destroyed as his expensive clothes. Lindsay was backing away from the crowd, still crying, probably realizing that she would never live this down, that every person in Pine Valley would remember this moment for the rest of her life. They ran, both of them, together, pushing through the crowd toward the parking lot while hundreds of people watched and recorded their retreat. I stood on the float, microphone in hand, looking out at the faces of my neighbors and friends. People who had watched me grow up, who had known me as Danny's less successful older brother, who had probably pitied me for years without realizing it. Now they were cheering for me. Now I was the hero of my own story. "Revenge," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the festival grounds, "is a dish best served in front of the whole damn town." The crowd erupted again. People were clapping, whistling, shouting approval. Pete Kowalski was leading a chant of my name. Margaret Hoffman, who had apparently attended the festival with her family, was shaking her head but smiling slightly, probably realizing that Lindsay's employment problems had just solved themselves. I climbed down from the float and walked through the crowd, accepting handshakes and backslaps, listening to people tell me how proud they were of how I'd handled the situation. For the first time in my adult life, I was the center of positive attention, the person everyone wanted to talk to, the man who had stood up for himself and won. Lindsay and Danny were gone, their reputations destroyed, their comfortable life in Pine Valley ended forever. They would have to start over somewhere else, carrying the shame of what they'd done and how it had ended. I stayed at the festival until closing time, enjoying every moment of my victory, savoring the knowledge that I had taken two people who thought they were better than me and reduced them to laughingstocks who would be remembered as cautionary tales for years to come. Justice, I realized, tastes better than anything else in the world.